Welcome to Making Stuff Up, the podcast by the Quinte Arts Council team, where we talk to all kinds of creators about how they got interested in making stuff up. You're here with your hosts Cody, Janet, and Heather. Today, we're talking to visual artist Luisé Cisneros about the art of visual creation. Luisé, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for this amazing opportunity.
Thank you. Can you please introduce yourself just a little bit?
Yes. Hi, my name is Luisé Cisneros. I'm a Mexican-Canadian non-binary artist. In Mexico is happening a new movement that is inclusive language for especially LGBTQ community and for non-binary people. So they're trying to do that. That's brand new. I'm still learning that. And that's one of the reasons that I also changed my name, because I consider myself non-binary for my journey of the gender. And that's the reason I decided to change it. Before, Luisa is for a female and Luis is for male. So it didn't exist like a non-binary name, and that's the reason I changed it, and that's the reason I emphasize with the accent, with the A, because that's what they're doing. They're creating the inclusive language, adding to the words like an E or A in Spanish. But also, like, there's another current that is the X. That's the reason you say instead of Latinos or Latinas, is Latinx. Right. With the X. But I don't know, the X to me has a different meaning, and I like more the E, and that's the reason I added to my name.
That's very interesting.
Yes, I love
it's something that I'm learning. Thank you.
Well, I started learning Spanish, and I never thought, because I wanted to learn Italian. Italian is has Germanic kind of background, and English, and then Spanish is like French. You've got your female and your masculine, your feminine.
Yeah, and that's how they teach us. Like in words, like you learn, like one is female and one is male, and depending on that, it has connotations. And it's something that I actually explore in my practice, the power of language and words, especially living in that diaspora that I'm like a Mexican, but I'm living in Canada, and how it affects you in the beginning. There were certain words, like for me, they didn't have a strong meaning because I was just learning them in English. But if the same word in Spanish, you mentioned it was a huge impact. And that happened with a lot of friends. A lot of my friends are Latin too. And even that we share the same language, that is Spanish, the words, they have different connotations. And especially like some like swear words that are like, for them, they were not that they were not that strong for them, and they use them sometimes. And for me, I was like, oh my God, like, how do you using that word? Right. But like for them, it was like nothing. It means totally different things. And it was the same language. So now if you translate that into like another language, it is the same thing. Like for some people, it is really strong, but for other words, they were not. Yeah. And I like that exploration about like how the language affects you, and then how do you learn it. And now that I spent like 17 years in Canada, I already know like how strong those words are. So it is playing with your mind when you hear those voices and the echoes and the influence that it has in your brain. And that's one of the things that I explore in my practice.
It's not only about how words affect us, but also how words represent us.
Yeah, and the history of them is really interesting to study. Like some of them, you appropriate them, especially when they are used against people. You appropriate sometimes those words and you change the meaning, and then it takes powers from the people who use them against you, and then you use them to make it stronger for you. So it is this play about like perceptions and like cultural and history, and that's what I'm really interested about.
I have to lean in to the language and culture. It's interesting because, this is making stuff up, and I'm not going to swear today too much for Cody, but in French Canadians, swear words are anything to do with the church. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that. But this is the thing about like a language, that you learn so much about the culture, and you learn so much about even people, and that's what I'm really interested in. When you have a huge family, and especially in Mexico, when different families belong to different class, and even different places in Mexico, they use language also to show their personality, but also to show the background and the culture. Having a grandmother that was British, Also, like sometimes she spoke English, and I was like really interested. I'm really bad with languages. I'm surprised that I'm speaking like this.
I can't tell that at all. I was going to say you must be a linguistics minor. With
Oh,
your art.
no, not at all. I'm really bad. It took me 17 years to learn English.
Wow.
And I always was like really, really bad in languages at school. Like I took a Spanish because you have to take it when you're like in high school and things like that. And I was really, really bad. But I'm always fascinated about narrating stories and telling stories. I think my two parents and my grandmother is always telling us stories about like the family and where we came from and the culture and all that, and I always fascinated me, and I was like, that's something that I would like to do, and that's something that I incorporate in the practice. So language has always been a fascination for me because I'm really bad at it, so I try to learn so much about it, and it's a way to learn about the culture, and it's a way to learn about Canada. It's something that I like for my citizenship. I have to learn. You have to go through a test, like an English test, and I was learning like the idioms and like vocabulary, and then being with my partner that he's Canadian, I'm always fascinated like to learn about like their own kind of like lingo in their family and things like that, and it's really fascinating.
Well, I think to do something in a couple of different languages is a challenge in itself, but to go that extra level and to start looking at the way language affects culture and status and all, that's a lot of work.
I think there's even myths. Like I remember these about witches, like how they curse you, and like and even in religion, like they say like God spoke the world, and like and that's how created. So there's always the power of language in any culture or anything that you want to look at, and like sometimes like even a person telling you something can influence you and change your mind, and through language you can change your brain, and that's the way we learn and communicate. So I think sometimes we forget how powerful language is, and it's something that I like always has intrigued me.
Luisé, I think you gave us an incredible example of that with your installation that you had here at the Quinte Arts Council. It was just such a fabulous piece that was very moving, affected anyone who saw it, and really gave us time to reflect. And I love how you talked about it's not a celebration of LGBTQ, it's also a reflection and looking back to support where there isn't support for.
That's something that I'm trying to reconcile, because like I do celebrate my two cultures. I appropriated Canada as my culture, and I celebrate both. But I think also celebration means taking to the weakness and opportunities that we have to improve, and it's something that we cannot forget, because like sometimes when you always think that something is perfect, then that's when it falls back, is when it like seriously crumbles. And it's something that we always have to look back, learn from our mistakes, and take an opportunity to improve it and to make it better. And it's something that I want to do, and it's something that I think living between the two cultures allows me to see things that are like sometimes it is difficult to see because it's foreseen. Like sometimes it is easy and get caught in one perspective, but when you travel and when you go to different places, often you get to see those cracks sometimes, and you learn from that, and you get to see through that perspective. There are difficult topics to have. There is difficult sometimes to criticize something without even sometimes creating damage, because a critique sometimes can hurt, but sometimes from the hurt comes healing, and sometimes from healing it creates something new and better, and that's what I hope that I can create.
Can you describe some of like your biggest artistic influences? Your work is so varied.
Yeah, I get bored really. That's one of my problems. Since I was a little kid, I have so much influences, and the reason why is my parents that were so much involved in culture, and it's something that I think growing up in Mexico City, when you're surrounded by art everywhere you look, we have First Nations, and it is really intriguing, like growing up in the Mexica culture, because you get to see it everywhere. We have pyramids in Mexico City. We have architecture that is like, can be for thousands of years or 500 years, or even something brand new that I like. It speaks, the building literally speaks to you. So it's like something so surreal. So architecture in Mexico is something that I've always seen. There's sculptures that we have so many, like from Toledo, from different artists. Even Diego Rivera did like a few of them. And muralism to me has been really, really important as public art that I use in just not a museum, but I like sometimes on the streets in public. Street art has been another thing that I love. Frida Kahlo, I know that I'm gonna sound like Frida again, but I think for me, like seeing somebody who it didn't fit in that period of time when women were really judged and they were almost have like their script of their lives that what they have to do, and she fought against that. Like to me, that was really inspirational, and I really like that. And Cicados, we have Posadas that he did a lot of critique in society with a lot of his pieces. So it has been always like many artists. My aunt Elva, that unfortunately passed away, but she also was a fabulous landscaper, and my uncle Jaime, a choreographer. Again, it's just where you look, it was always inspirational in those times. And I'm just talking about Mexico, then you can go obviously international, but it's just like really fascinating that just having it like so close to you, because I find it that I like sometimes art can be really far away, especially if it is in a gallery where they don't let you in. But like in Mexico, it is everywhere where you look, and that's the thing. And Mexico City as a living art too, because it's a city that it shows their culture in everything, like just not the way of living, but also their street food, their street art, and everything is also really inspirational too. So living in a city like that, and also living in Toronto, that is also happening right now, that and then come to Belleville, and again what you guys are doing is really inspirational too, and it's really amazing. And to me, that's where it fits.
So what is your go-to medium at the moment?
Ooh. Right now, I'm working so much with paper. Paper for me is something that it has a lot of history. It was work with First Nations in Mexico, but also it has a history of colonialism. Like the Spaniards brought it to, and the Spaniards were influenced by China too. So you have the trade that it has a lot of richness in that way. So you can go through different influences, and then if you add the history that it has in Mexico and the mix between the Spaniards and the First Nations, so you have so much work to graph.
Right.
So, and that's we're talking just about materiality. And then on the top of that, in the culture of Mexico, we have a lot of tradition to do it with papel picado, that is cutted paper. So from there, just seeing it like in your parties, then you use it with piñatas, and you use it a lot, and it influences. It brings you memories too of your experiences with those pieces. So to me, that's inspiration that I have in to use that material, right. And it's really accessible for anyone, right? And so, and it is something that I like, to me, invites you to connect with the piece or the artwork, and it's something that I'm working with. So right now I'm working with paper.
Nice.
And now, let's take a moment to thank one of the sponsors who made today's show possible. McDougall Insurance is the largest insurance brokerage in Eastern Ontario. They care about their communities by supporting charities and nonprofit organizations. Representing over 50 insurance companies gives McDougall the unique ability to find you the most competitive rates possible. Operating since 1946, McDougall Insurance focuses on their legendary service to help serve you, their customers. If you're looking for personal, commercial, farm, and life insurance, or financial services, look no further than McDougall Insurance.
So you talked about realism and public art. Can you tell us a little bit about your recent mural in Toronto?
Yes. Well, it's an amazing opportunity that I think Canada is realizing that public art affects so much the community in a positive way. The experience to paint in public is totally different when you are in just your studio. When you're in your studio, you're in a bubble. So there's no interruptions, there's no communication or even feedback. You just work and concentrate on your piece and you finish it and that's it. But when you paint in public art, there's always people saying things to you. And my experience was really positive. I didn't think that I will connect with such a diverse age of people. There were little kids that they make their parents stop the car, pull down the window and scream, "Hey, I love your piece." And to me, I was like, what? This is incredible. Or stop their parents. They were walking and they were tourists with their family and they stop and literally, "Mom, look at the mural, I love it." And kids are really honest, and that's something that you cannot get more than that. That feedback is really precious and really amazing. I wanted to create a piece that it tell my story, and the mural is about I was born in Mexico. I was born in an area that is called Iztapalapa, that it means it is a stone in the middle of the water, and that's what it means. My last name, it is Cisneros, that means swan, and that's the reason it was the egg, and my two parents representing my family. It's something that I want to do too in my practice, representing that people were not just my ascendants, but who got me here. And it's not just my family, but all my ancestors and all the people that thanks to them I'm here, and I want to represent that. And then on the opposite side, it was the Canadian side, not just representing the diaspora, but the similitudes between the two countries. And it's something that I'm trying to consult too, just especially right now where there's a lot of fragmentation and there's a lot of trying to devise and trying to see the differences. I'm trying to do the opposite. I'm trying to say, let's connect, let's see the similarities that we have in cultures, and let's celebrate that, and from there make connections and see that we share more things in common than differences. And those differences, we can celebrate them, but also let's celebrate the similarities. And that's something that I'm trying to say in the mural, that we have connected. And in Mexico City was built on the lake. Toronto is a lake. In Belleville, you have also water, and it's really important in the culture in Belleville too. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I'm trying to relate, and how we can see these things and put them together. And in the mural, that's what I wanted to do, and have those conversations with people. When you create public art, you can have those conversations, and I was happy enough that I have them. So it was really amazing.
Oh, it's inspiring for all of us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love that you talk about collaboration from what you see around you. What about collaboration with other artists? Can you tell us about maybe a current project you're working on or something from the past?
Well, we are working on building a collaborative with some friends. So in Toronto, so hopefully that is going to happen soon. So
I'm asking for secrets, aren't I? I better stop.
No, that's great. I like to talk about things that are cooking right now. I did a project in the beginning of the pandemic, mm-hmm. that I was talking about, that collaboration with an artist that was international. Her name is Samantha from the Philippines. We're still in touch on Instagram. That was amazing, and that's something that I think I'm trying to work more. Recently, I just hosted a party with a lot of artists in Toronto, and the reason why is because as an artist, sometimes we think that you just need to work and concentrate in your pieces, in your art, and sometimes it gets really isolated, mm-hmm. and sometimes it gets really alone. So it's great to create collaborative projects, mm-hmm. and the reason why is because you get an exchange of ideas and feedback, but you also learn so much. And it's something that I learned that at school, because sometimes we think at school we only learn from professors, but it's not true. Also, we learn so much about our classmates, and especially we always ask for feedback, and we always ask like, oh, like maybe you can resolve this problem in this way. And sometimes you get that I like, sometimes when you're working in your studio, you don't get that. So it is really important to not forget about like collaborations. And as you said, I'm cooking and a few things are coming, but I cannot tell also so much.
That's okay. We're just excited
yes,
to
absolutely.
keep an eye on that for sure.
You develop some of your art skills by working with others. Are there other ways that you develop your artistic skills?
One of the things that I think allowed me to be really creative, it was by watching my parents. One thing, I think my parents, they were creating in different ways. My mom, especially by cooking. Like sometimes I have skills like, there's nothing to eat on the weekend. Let me just see what we have left over in the fridge and create something from nothing. And it's something like sometimes looking how people that are close, how we resolve problems. I think it is really important because you learn. I think sometimes get out of your field, in this case, art. It was really important to me to see different things, like even my partner, how he resolves problems in terms of students' affairs, and always learning from different people what are they doing in their field. Sometimes I think that it makes me think, okay, if they're resolving that, can I apply that into art? As I mentioned, learning from different people, but also not just learning from them, but also trying to support them and trying to help them. Sometimes that it creates a new perspective too. Because sometimes I think as an artist, your ego is always like about me, about my art, about things, and you forget about the others. And it's something that I try to not forget, like always helping others too. And in a way, it's a way to see new things. Recently, watching TV too, it is something, going to plays, going to movies, even going to exhibitions. It is really important as an artist always having visual culture and always learning new things. And it is something that I try to do. And even sometimes cooking with friends, it is something that I like. You learn, yes, doing fun things. And not always like business, work. Yeah. It's so amazing because again, your mind change immediately, or at least my mind changed when I was in public art. I was like, okay, I know, because they train us. We took 1 week of training in those terms. One, it was from the city, and then I had with another friend various talks about how is painting outside and how is interaction and all that. So your mind change it up from your studio that is please not interruptions because I'm in the zone.
Yeah.
And then in public art is you're going to be interrupted every single time.
And there's it's almost performance art in a way. And I know because you have that performance experience, I'm sure the way you approach public art is different than that artist that spends all their time in the studio. You have that performance background as well.
Absolutely. And it is funny because it is true. Many people stop and they were taking pictures and filming and look at you painting. And if you don't have that, you can get really nervous and and I know some artists, unfortunately, they will not be able, but I will encourage everyone to do it at least once in your life, because you will learn how is the experience and maybe you will change your mind. But absolutely, I totally agree with that.
How is the timeline for that? Did you finish it in the time you expected, or
because
of the interactions?
The disruptions?
It was interaction, the weather, another thing. It was so hot, so hot. So that was another thing. And there were so many things. It was a box, an electric box.
Right.
So it had a lot of dimensions. It had a lot of course and different things. I never painted something like that. It has always been canvas or walls. So it was totally different. And learned the technique in terms of the paint. It was a little bit different because it's an exterior paint and it was industrial paint. So it was a little bit different than comparing with painting on canvas or with oil or watercolor. So always the technique is a little bit different. So you have to adjust. lost. But it was really amazing. Like, I love it and learning. And as you say, learn also interacting with people too, because in the beginning I was in shock that people not just stop and say something, but like sometimes they really touch you and say, hey, I want your attention. I want to have a conversation with you. And that was amazing.
It was amazing.
Because you remind me to Mexico.
Okay.
So you have those kind of interactions in Mexico. So to me, I was like, wow, this is incredible. Like, it was amazing. And many of them, they were like tourists too. So that was like, you see the difference in cultures and the way that they approach people. And that was really, to me, it was a learning experience, a really positive one.
Wanted to talk a little bit about the conversations that you create when you're creating. The first thing, when I first was introduced to your art, you had some wearable art on. So I want to talk about how your wearable art, how that came about, and just the conversations that come out of your wearable art.
I think one of the important things that I want to do as an artist is the narratives or the stories that I wanna portray. And sometimes as an artist, sometimes you can be social awkward, or sometimes you can be really timid, especially when you don't feel comfortable in certain scenarios. As when there are so many people that you don't know, sometimes it's really difficult to get comfortable. And believe it or not, I'm a little bit shy sometimes. I get like in my cocoon, and it's like, this is too much for me. So by wearing my pieces, number one, I'm telling stories that sometimes I don't have the words that I can describe, or sometimes I don't have the state of mind to say them. And I think by wearing them, I can have a piece with me that I can have those conversations, and sometimes without even saying them. Sometimes it can be in like an icebreaker, like people can approach and I can say, oh, I love your piece. And from there I can engage, and I know that I'm safe talking with them because they're already engaged in art, and I know that, okay, so we have similar things. So in a way, I use those pieces like that. But also is a tribute to my mom. My mom always was like really glamorous and always like dressed up all the time, no matter when. Like she always wanted to be like that, and it's something that in a way it reminds me to my mom too. So even that I'm like I don't put that personal touch of my mom, but I like in a way it's a tribute to her, like wearing those pieces. And so I always try to do that, try to remember like my mom, and it is something that I love doing. So
are there any current like art trends that are inspiring your work?
Yes, we go back to technology. There's I'm really bad with names, so I think his name is Lozano Hammer. I can be wrong, but he's a Mexican-Canadian artist based in Quebec, and I think in Montreal. He does a lot of technology on art. Like, it's incredible. He uses a lot of algorithms and interactive pieces. And recently he had a piece in Toronto about lights that I think it was one piece that I was reading your heartbeat, and the lights light up with your heartbeat. So he does a lot of things. He had another show where in his screen he had the 43 students that unfortunately were assassinated in Mexico. And then it was a camera that read the people who were in front of that screen to find your face, which student was more suited to the face of the student that they passed away. So in that way, looking similarities into facial expressions and facial structure. So in that way, you can connect with one of the students that passed away, just to make awareness about what happened in Mexico. So he always does like these incredible, well thought pieces. And one that stuck me, it was the one that I did in the border between a Mexican city and in United States, another city. But these two cities, they share a lot of history because pre-Columbian time, they they were not cities. So they were part of the same First Nations and all that. So he wanted to share that there were a lot of families that they were separated because of, again, the division back then. So he created lights that he projected into the sky that united the two cities, but at the same time he put microphones on the two cities, so there were communications between each other, because there were families that they couldn't cross the border, but in that way they couldn't talk, and there were musicians, and in both ways there were artists that they were giving feedback and things like that. So it was an amazing piece. So for me, like, again, he's using technology in an incredible way to connect people and to create these pieces of art that also helps society and the communities. So really amazing. And it's something that I like right now. I'm like, oh my God. And again, technology is a tool that we can use for our benefit and creating amazing pieces of art. So.
Have you met this artist and been able to?
No.
Not yet, eh?
But I was talking about COVID and talking about what happened. We had a Zoom, it was like a Zoom conference, and I was in there, and like it was really amazing. I get to ask a few questions, and like we met virtually, if you want to say that. But definitely something that I have it in my mind. I follow him on Instagram, and I have asked him questions on his Instagram. He has responded, and yeah, it is something that I like. Hopefully in the future I can do a collaboration or something, because it is something that
be amazing. It just sounds, the way you talk about him makes me think about like how you're moving forward with your own artistic work, and I can see the connection there. I just love
Thank you.
It's really cool.
Thank you.
And now, let's take a minute to thank one of the sponsors who made today's show possible. The City of Belleville supports the arts through the Arts and Culture Fund and the Mayor's Week of the Arts. If you're in the mood to look at art, take a stroll through the John M. Parrott Art Gallery, Belleville's premier publicly supported art gallery, which receives 93% of its operating fund from the city. If you're looking for a publicly funded museum, then take a stroll down Bridge Street to visit the Glenmore Museum and National Historic Site, home to artifacts reflecting the history of the Belleville region. So what would you say is the purpose or goal of your work? If you're very interested in artists who the goal of their work seems to be connection, is that something similar for yours?
It is connection and being in the middle, because that's, I think, how I define myself, being in the middle. In between us, there was an artist talk that I participated in Sur Gallery. There were other artists that are resonating with that. Being in between, I think, those connections. And I feel it's not only connections with community as the public art happened, but I think connections even between the two countries. And I even will say the three countries of North America, because I live in United States too, and I have family there too, and I always have that connection also with United States. Because I live in Tijuana, in another border city, and I live in Windsor, in another border city. So I always have these, and as Mexican, as Canadian, you have influence for United States because they're your neighbors. I think connections between the three countries, the three cultures, and like, that's what it fascinates me, and that's what I want to narrate. Connections with my ancestors, with my family, and all that. I feel like, to me, that's what I want to portray, and that's what I want the connections with the spectators or with the public, hopefully to connect with my pieces. So they can see themselves reflected in those narratives, even that I like. Sometimes the narrative it is focused on LGBTQ or family dynamics or immigration or land. Hopefully they can see something that they can connect with them and like resonate with them, and then read those narratives. And that's something that I hope that I can do and have the impact with them. So
Luisé, I hear your passion for art, but I also really hear your passion for learning. Would you consider yourself a professional student in any way, or?
Oh wow!
I just hear that passion for learning.
I have never heard that as a professional learner. That's amazing. A professional student. I think since being a little kid, we always we're always learning, and that's how we always. I have never met anyone that who doesn't learn. You know, I have never met anyone that I like doesn't want to know more. I feel that I like sometimes we don't hear them. Mm-hmm. Talking about public art, it was amazing that I not only connected with the public, the tourists, but also people who are living in that community. Mm-hmm. I was having conversations with them, and I was listening to them and listening how important like this program of having public art for them it was, you know. And I was talking to different, not only people who were living there, but I was talking to different homeless that they are in that area and listening to their stories. So I think you can learn from anywhere. And even sometimes waking up and like, what I dream? Okay, what does that mean? You know, like right. There are always opportunities to learn everywhere. And I feel that everybody's doing that just in different ways. And we have to recognize that there's not only one way to learn. There are different ways to learn. And it's something that I want to celebrate.
So you were talking about narratives. You were talking about communication, the way your art actually, conversations. I wanted to just ask, was there ever a time when you felt that your voice wasn't heard?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When I was with my parents, to be honest with you, as a kid, they were taught by, obviously, their parents, my grandparents, and I guess it's something that I came from generations that are like kids we were not allowed to speak. We were not allowed to talk. Even like I remember they used to have like meetings, and it was like just adults meetings. So you have to be seated and not make noises, not interrupt, nothing. And also my generation, it was like, oh, they're kids, meaning like you were not developed like in terms of like even learning or like even talking or even understanding. Even the cartoons and like certain things, they were like designed in that way because they think that are like, you know, we were kids. So that was the term. So that was one. At school, it was another one that I liked. The way that I learned, it was like you have to memorize this and you have a test and you have to repeat what you have to memorize, and that was it. So there was nothing about interpretation. There was nothing about like, you know, my understanding or my learning and all this kind of stuff. It was more about just memory, based on memory. So having those experience, and then as a majority and I started growing up, being LGBTQ in Mexico, at that time, you didn't have a voice or a space to express yourself. So that was another thing. And religion, it was part of it too. So there were so many things that I like to me was like, stop being yourself, don't be yourself, like shut up, your voice, we don't want to hear it. And even the tone of my voice too, like, you know, you have to have a certain voice to be in Mexican culture. And if you're if you were perceived as male, you have to have like this deep, like a strong voice, and even the way you speech and the tone and like the rhythm that you have to speak. So many things. So to me was like, you know, another reason why I came to Canada, because like you hear like Canada, it was like they allow you to speak. So when I came here and I was like, oh yeah, that's true. I can have a voice. And I start hearing yourself too. That's the reason I'm talking so much. But I'm like, it is fascinating because like really, and it's something that I was actually talking to another friend. She's from Brazil. And we were talking about that, how when you live in two different countries, you have two different personas. And sometimes coming back to Mexico or even speaking on the phone with people in Mexico, I change. And the way that I speak and the way that in a way it was like acting, talking about performance. In a way it's performative to me. And my parents sometimes say, he even teases me about like, oh, here comes the, you know, you Mexican acting, because like sometimes I have to do it is self-defense mechanism. But in here I can be myself. And it's funny because I was born in Mexico. Spanish is my first language, but I can feel more myself in English and being Canadian than Mexican. So it is something that I also like talking about criticism and talking about like how you see your culture, you celebrate, but also you criticize. And it's something that in the mural, in a way, I'm criticizing too, talking about that. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I like, yeah, unfortunately, I have those triggers, and I have something that I like. In a way, my art is therapeutic in that way. And it has gave me healing, but also like a learning too in those ways about like I didn't have a place and now I have it, and now I have to reconcile that, but fight for it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Does the arts community in Quinte, in Belleville, give you that safe space?
Absolutely, and especially you guys. It is something that I like. I think as an emerging artist, it's really difficult to find no matter where, because I think it is also not just we are so many, but also like sometimes you don't know how to reach, or sometimes you don't. It is difficult for you to find spaces. But when you have spaces like the Arts Council in Quinte here, when they let you not just only be yourself, but they hear you, you feel like you really have a future. And it's something that is really important, I think, for anyone, like no matter the age, because that's the other thing, age is, and it is real, and it happens sometimes. And like maybe I don't look that old, but yeah, that's
Don't you fool us.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
But it is something that I like. Yeah, it is true. So yeah, absolutely, you feel that, and you feel that sense, and it thanks to you.
How can the arts community here support more of what you do and more of the artists in the community?
I think it is happening. One way I think that you guys are doing is changing the space to, as an example, as a gallery. So that way people can not only show their art, but also like create projects within the space too. So that's having a space. I think it is important too. I think we see some public art here, but I would like to see even more. And I think there's a space too. And I think it will happen because definitely, again, I think the city of Toronto is leading, but I think that like other cities are seeing what is happening in Toronto, and I think they will follow up, and I think it is going to happen.
They just approved doing micro individual homes for the homeless community, and it occurred to me that it would be really cool if we could gather artists and work with the housing people to paint like a wall of each home.
There were many members of the community that they approached, and that they wanted like a box painted in their community. But I was like, but we want to talk to the artists. We want to like being reflected in the piece and things like that. And that to me was really important, because that's the power of the art, when you can see yourself reflected, and you can. Sometimes we forget as an artist that we have a voice, and we are privileged in that way, and we can use that voice to give the space for voices that are not heard. And that's something that is really important to me. And that's the reason I want to do also my art accessible to people, because in that way they can hear themselves and they can see themselves.
Heather mentioned an installation, and our listeners can't see it. So could you just spend a couple minutes and talk about that installation that you had here at the Art Council?
Yeah, installation is something new for me. In terms of like before, like I used to paint a lot, I used to sculpt a lot, but installation is something that the University of Okara has taught me to. And I have amazing professors. Stan is one of them. Nina is another one. Again, it's been really, really incredible to learn that. And I wanted to create an installation that not just talks about materiality, but also affects people's. And the reason why is because I think there are certain issues really important that like people sometimes forget, or we think that again, they have been resolved, and I don't think they have been resolved. And that's the reason to me it is really important to bring attention. And I think installation is a really powerful tool that we have, because it trespasses the space, but also creates an experience for the person. And a way to invite even more the people into the installation. That's the reason for me it's important to perform in them, because in that way people can see that you can interact with the installations. We are so trained to see pieces in museums and in galleries that I do not touch or do not interact with them, just see them and that's it. And that's the reason I'm trying to to do that with performing within my pieces, and that way people felt that they can be invited and they can interact with them. But also, just in case there's something missing in translation within the installation, I also remind them what is this about, and that's the reason I think it is the power of the performance and installation.
This has been absolutely great. I think we've learned a lot about culture and everything. It's been really great.
Oh, thank you.
Can you tell our audience where they can find more of your work?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to my website, www.luisecisneros.ca, or you can go to my Instagram at Luisé Cisneros Art.